every single day, there are multiple people in this group going, help, I've cut out everything. I'm low oxalate, I'm low salicylate, I'm low histamine, blah, blah, blah. I'm still reacting. I'm getting worse. I can only eat rice and chicken and everything else I react to. And I'm like, you need to heal your gut. If you just keep cutting out those foods, it's just a never ending cycle.
G'day everyone and welcome to The Rory Bland Show. I'm excited about this episode because it's all about histamine sensitivities, intolerances, and how you can heal it through food and through gut healing. So this is a topic that I'm very connected to because I have a histamine sensitivity, and if I eat the wrong foods, then I do get reactions. And I've brought Heather on, who is an incredible nutritionist who honestly needs at least 50,000 more followers because her information and knowledge is incredible and very life-changing if you take it accordingly. So she has come on to talk about histamine sensitivities, intolerances, how to heal histamine stuff, and also we talk about the carnivore diet, the GAPS diet, her experience healing her gut and her body, and her husband's experience. It's very fascinating, very interesting interview. This episode was filmed about 2 months ago, and in it we talk about my experience with histamine sensitivities, eating some of my favorite meat snacks and foods from Barbell Foods, which you can get 10% off using the code RB10 at barbellfoods.com.au. Anyway, so we talk about my experience having joint pain flare-ups from having too many packs of these meat snacks, biltong meat sticks per day. Since then, my histamine sensitivity has gone right on down where I could have multiples of what I talk about. Like I could probably have 5 or 6 packets with zero reaction now. So that's really cool. So it's just interesting to see how far you can come in the spirit of a couple months just through that gut healing process. So yeah, just thought I'd mention that. Very excited to bring this one to you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. G'day guys, welcome back to another episode. Today is an awesome one. Well, they're all awesome, but this one is awesome because we've got Heather, who is a nutritionist. She's a gut health expert, and she has an incredible body of knowledge that's just swimming around her in her head, and I just can't wait to extract it all from her brain and give it to you guys because it's so interesting. But before we jump into it, Heather, how are you? Who are you? What do you do?
Hi, Rory. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm super excited to be doing this podcast. I am Heather. I'm a nutritionist and a GAPS practitioner, and I'm a mom, and I specialize in GAPS. Most, if not all, my clients are doing the GAPS diet or are about to start it. And I specialize in histamine intolerance because that's just kind of our journey with myself and my husband and our whole family. And everyone I work with GAPS pretty much has histamine intolerance. So I've sort of specialized in that. And I also have a YouTube channel. So that is dedicated to trying to explain the GAPS diet, some of the more tricky things, because as you read through the book, it can be very, black and white, sort of confusing, not clear, because there's so much information. So my goal with my YouTube channel is to really make gut health really easy to understand, the GAPS protocol easy to understand, answering frequently asked questions, and just bringing clarity for everyone.
I love your content for that reason, where you're right, like even though everything you need is within the GAPS book, I feel that extra information is required. So when I was going through my first 30 days of, like carnivore / GAPS, I went to your videos pretty kind of like religiously when I was learning about die-off and I was going through like histamine responses and all these things. So it's definitely a great resource that you're building there. So guys, like definitely check all that stuff out after this because she's got so much in-depth stuff. But yeah, the histamine thing is a big thing, and a lot of people, like, because I've started talking about that as well as I've been learning, and everyone was like, can you tell me all about it? I'm like, I don't really know much, but you do. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, with the histamine intolerance stuff, like I said, most people who start the GAPS diet, they don't know they have histamine intolerance because the histamine intolerance comes from a gut imbalance. And so a lot of people do GAPS, or what they think is GAPS, and they're not paying attention to the histamine aspect. And then they think they're getting a lot worse. And then they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they're like, it didn't work for me. I hear that all the time. It didn't work for me. It made me really bad. I got worse, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, you probably had a histamine issue and you didn't know. So you're doing the long cooked bone broths and tons of fermented foods and you're feeling terrible. But if you can just notice the histamine issue and that it's common and that most people have it and pay particular attention to it, it's so much easier, like way easier to do GAPS, and you actually get that healing.
Yeah, it's something that I didn't know enough about. Like I started trying GAPS maybe 5 years ago, and I was like, oh, bone broths, I know how to do that. 24-hour long bone broths. And all these kinds of things, and I didn't really learn about it till now. So yeah, I'd love to do a kind of a bit more of a deep dive on the histamines. But before we do, like, your story, how did you get to actually doing this? And yeah, what's your health story? Do you have your own health story, or how's it impacted your family?
Yes. So I watched a few of your videos actually, and it really resonated with me, just that whole journey of like being sick as a kid. Like you, I got my tonsils out. I was just always sick, always had ear infections, always given antibiotics. I had chronic stomach pains. Like I would be laying on the couch after dinner every single night, no matter what we ate, just in crippling pain. And I think I was 4 or 5 and the doctors prescribed me a prescription antacid and told my mom to take it every time I eat. Here, give this to your daughter every time you eat. It was that bad. And kind of like you, I would get like bronchitis and pneumonia and strep and just like all these things at once, and I'd be out of school for 6 weeks. I mean, it was absolutely crazy. So that was kind of my childhood. And then I dealt with, as it progressed, the hormones, the acne, all that kind of stuff as it changes when you get older. And I just kind of thought that was a normal part of life. And thankfully my mom didn't put me on those prescription antacids. She sort of tried to change the diet. She didn't really know, but she kind of tried to take out fried food, which was a great step. Looking back, I found out that it was definitely the seed oils, the canola oils. So I was like, before seed oils were cool, I was totally allergic and intolerant. And I don't even mind that because they're disgusting for you. But yeah, just crippling pain. Then I got to college. I found some girls who were kind of on a journey. And like you, I did the whole like vegetarian, vegan, juicing, raw, just kind of everything. And I just thought, oh, I just need to get more and more and more intense. Like less and less sustainable and more intense, you know, just juicing all day and just raw chocolate all day and raw cacao. And then I finally found gaps. I ended up at a Weston A. Price Foundation, and I pretty much did a 180 overnight. I was like broth, stock, fermented foods, all these things I hated. And I could not believe it. It's like my skin cleared up overnight. Like I didn't even know skin was an issue with health. So this was back in 2010 or 11. So quite a while ago. But I just became like a GAPS evangelist so quick. I mean, I was like my period pain went away. Like you, I had that back pain. Back pain went away. So many random things that I didn't know were connected. And I just felt amazing. And I went from, also I used to take naps for 2 hours every day, like, and sleep 10 hours at night. I think I had the early stages of chronic fatigue. And I'm so grateful for GAPS, because if I didn't really get into this journey of health, I definitely think I would have been a chronic fatigue syndrome sufferer, along with probably a ton of other things. So yeah, and then fast forward, I obviously became a nutritionist and a GAPS practitioner pretty quick. So I've been super passionate about that. And even when I was going through health school, we would have like exams, and my answer would always be like, you know, what would you suggest for this person? I'm like, GAPS. And my professor was like, okay, we can't just say GAPS for everything. And I was like, yes, we can. This is what everyone needs. Yeah. Then fast forward 7 years, I met my husband. So I met him about 7 years ago. So something like that. And he was a chronic migraine sufferer. He had a migraine every single day. Some days it would just be a headache, but when we woke up, it wouldn't be, do you have a headache today? It was, how bad's your headache? And honestly, probably 4 days out of the week, he was in bed on drugs. That didn't even help. It was rough. And it was so bad on our finances, our marriage, just everything, especially when we had kids. It's like, I'm home with the kids, and then he can't go to work 4 days a week. And it was just so stressful. Like, I really empathize with anyone who deals with migraines. And I figured out pretty quickly it was a histamine issue, but he was on his journey and he wasn't ready to commit to GAPS. And then finally one day he had the worst migraine he said he's ever had. And he was just like, I have to make a change. So he did GAPS for a few months. The goal was 2 years. I want to be super honest, because I'd love to say he did it for 2 years. He never had a migraine again. But the truth is he did it for about 3 months. And I had to kind of go, okay, this is your journey. I want to take the reins and just do everything for you. But that's not healthy for marriage or a relationship. So I was like, okay, you do it. And honestly, he didn't even do it very well. Looking back, I was like, I saw him drinking raw milk one day. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, isn't this GAPS? But even just doing maybe the 80% GAPS that he was doing for 4 months, he didn't have a migraine for 2 years after. So it's recommended to do 2 years to heal and seal your gut, to totally change your microbiome. He got relief from migraines within a week and didn't have them for a year or two. And he didn't even do a good job doing GAPS. And now to this day, so that was maybe 3 years ago. And at this point, he doesn't really get headaches. He'll maybe get a migraine I don't know, once a month. And he's, like I said, he's not eating GAPS. He's not really doing any of that. So even just that change in a few months, I'm so confident that if he were to have done it for 2 years, he would never deal with them again. But still, it's a very rare occurrence now. So I count that as a huge success. And I've seen tons of people fully recover from migraines who are committed. So it's just so passionate about that.
That's so profound in the fact that he didn't even do it to the T, because GAPS is quite, I mean, it depends how you view it. To some people, they see it as strict. I think to you and me, we don't probably really see it as strict at all. But it's like doing it not even properly for that short period of time has such a long-lasting benefit. And I've just been recording a video, and I was talking about, like, some people think this is so restrictive because you're cutting out even starches, right? Like, how am I going to go through life without potatoes? Well, if you give yourself a short window of time that's not forever, you reap those benefits forever. And this is the perfect example of that is the case. And that's an amazing story.
Exactly, Rory. It's that short-term pain, long-term gain. And I'm on some histamine groups. I'm surprised I haven't got kicked off, to be honest, because I'm constantly like, this can be reversed. And everyone's like, no, mine's genetic, mine's this, mine's that. And I'm like, no, it can be reversed. And the moderators are like, you got to go on low histamine, you got to go on low oxalate, you got to go on low salicylate. That's what they tell everyone. And every single day, there are multiple people in this group going, help, I've cut out everything. I'm low oxalate, I'm low salicylate, I'm low histamine, blah, blah, blah. I'm still reacting. I'm getting worse. I can only eat rice and chicken and everything else I react to. And I'm like, you need to heal your gut. This is exactly what you said. If you just keep cutting out those foods, it's just a never ending cycle. Do the work now, put in the healing foods, do that short-term healing, and then long-term, you won't live like that. You won't be restricted.
For those that don't know what a histamine is, what is actually a histamine?
So it's sort of like an allergic response in your body. So if you get stung by a bee, you would have a histamine response. It comes from these cells that mostly line, it's called your epithelial cells. So that is like your sinuses, your mouth, your throat, and your gut. Anything in your body that comes in contact with the outside world, that's like your epithelial cells. And then in that you have mast cells. And when they sense some sort of allergic reaction, they release histamine to kind of calm it down. So that's why some people, they get stung by a bee and they like are kind of okay, they're fine. People who are sensitive to histamine are probably overproducing histamine, that compound. They're sensitive individuals. They get stung by a bee and they're like out for a day. And so histamine comes mainly from our mast cells when it senses some sort of allergic response. So that's kind of when you get the leaky gut. And I just want to say real quick, I have a 3-video series on this that I really go into depth on my YouTube channel. And that's really helps a lot of people that I haven't even worked with. So that's really cool. But when you have that leaky gut, food particles are leaking into your bloodstream, into that area where the mast cells are. And then they release histamine because they go, hey, you're not supposed to be here, right? It doesn't matter if it's gluten, dairy, or the best food in the world, you know? If it's leaking in there, your body responds with kind of that immune system response, and it sends out histamine. And so some of the symptoms would be like shortness of breath, racing heart, itchy eyes, itchy skin, getting hives, migraines. There's really a never-ending list of symptoms, but it is when you have a food response. Basically, it's a histamine response. So histamine comes from those cells basically in our gut when it senses an allergen, but it also comes from food and it comes from gut bacteria as well. So if you have an imbalanced microbiome, you have a lot of pathogenic bad bacteria and yeast, they will be releasing a lot of histamine where the good guys won't be, generally speaking. So when you heal your gut, you're healing that lining, so foods aren't leaking in anymore, histamine's not being released, but you're also rebalancing your gut bacteria so that there's more good bacteria that stop releasing histamine. So it's kind of like it comes from all these different ways, and GAPS really heals them all. And one more thing I want to say is GAPS also, there's an enzyme called DAO in those epithelial cells in our gut lining, and that breaks down histamine. And we're all supposed to have that. Our body is supposed to make it in a healthy situation, but people with a leaky gut and an imbalanced microbiome, their body isn't given what it needs. It's not nourished. Those little villi on the sides of the gut lining aren't able to create that enzyme. So those people are probably overproducing histamine. They're having allergic responses. They have the bad gut bacteria that's also overproducing histamine. and their body's not creating that DAO to break down histamine. So a lot of people will talk about the histamine bucket. It's like this bucket, and if you get too much, it overflows. And so there's a variety of ways our body copes with that, but mainly it comes down to healing the gut.
I relate to that bucket thing so much. Recently, I had a whole bunch of like biltong, which is basically like jerky and another type of jerky, like I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like another meat stick from South Africa. So I had all this stuff, and I had a really lazy couple of days where I didn't really have meat stock like I normally do. I don't normally I eat low histamine meats because I know that my body does react to it. So I was having these aged meats, these, biltong, and I noticed after 3 days of eating 2 packs a day or whatever it is, I had full-blown knee pain, like flaming knees. And I was like, hang on a second, what's that about? And I was like, okay, let's trace back. What have I eaten? Well, there's no preservatives, additives, it's clean. It's just because I know exactly every ingredient I'm eating at every time and what I'm introducing. And I'm like, it's because it's aged. It's probably because there's a histamine build-up. My bucket was overfloweth. And and then that's what happened. And so I think I did a coffee enema that night and an Epsom salt bath, and then I stopped eating it, and literally the next day, gone, zero knee pain, it's all gone. So I definitely relate to that bucket thing. Yeah. But not everyone knows how to deal with it, right?
Well, and to be honest, even the histamine experts, some of the doctors that make money off supplements and their books and everything, nothing against them, they put out great information, but their kind of mentality is like, this is a bucket and this is your genetic bucket. And so you're just sensitive to histamine, and there's kind of nothing you can do about it other than eat a low histamine diet. So I didn't really explain this part, but a lot of foods are high in histamine. Rory kind of got into it, but like aged stuff, basically the longer it sits around, it grows in the bacteria that causes histamine. So wines, beer, cheese, fermented foods, sauerkraut, all that, yogurt, like that is really high in histamine. That's why people have problems on the GAPS when they don't do it perfect or properly for histamine. But the jerky or aged beef or any of that it's just like, okay, you already have this pretty high histamine bucket, and then putting that stuff in just overflows it, and then you get that crazy histamine response. But one thing I want to say is a lot of practitioners that are trained in this, all they say is, take this specific enzyme and probiotic for the rest of your life and be on a low histamine diet. And I'm sorry, I believe food is meant to be enjoyed. I'm like, wine, in moderation, all these things, cheese, kefir. So you're telling me I can't have any of these amazing health-giving foods because I have a histamine problem? I'm like, no. Let's fix that. Let's fix the bucket. When we heal our gut, we basically poke holes in it. So now our body can detox it. And now our body's not filling it up so much. And I'm guessing with the biltong situation that if you probably would have done that at your start of GAPS, you probably would have had a way bigger reaction. And so now, like, you might be reacting a bit now, but it's probably calmed down since you've been doing GAPS for a while. Would you agree?
It's an interesting thing. And I see a lot of comments about it on my videos where they're like, oh, you're only noticing this now because you've only eaten meat for 30 days and so your body's more sensitive. It's like, well, I think that because I was so overloaded before, I think I was so used to like how I felt, and I wasn't sure what I felt from what. And now that I've kind of gone through this process, and I'm not even doing GAPS properly, right? Like I'm doing like half GAPS, half carnivore, really, out of just pure laziness, really. But I feel like because I'm more sensitive, I'm probably noticing it more, but at the same time, I'm probably being affected by it less, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm just thinking, like, if you started GAPS and I don't know, maybe a month into GAPS, if you did that, how long was it into kind of GAPS carnivore that you did the biltong binge?
It's like 3 weeks ago. And I've been doing this about 4 months. It would normally I'm fine if I have I might have 1 or 2 3 packs maybe a week max, or like once every 3 weeks. But yeah, it was about 3 weeks ago, and I was doing 2 to 3 packets of it a day. So 300 to 500 grams. So
is that how carnivores do emotional eating?
Yeah, it's the new form of emotional eating. You just pick something that fits into it. But I think you're right in the sense that if I would have done it beforehand, I would have been affected completely differently. And it's massive, like my ability to tolerate butter, ghee, even pumpkin now, probably even honey, like it's definitely increased, and that's without doing it to a T. So I'm with you in from what I've learned, that there's such a band-aid approach around literally everything, including histamine. And it's interesting, like I know all the experts out there are doing their best with what they know, but I feel like even a lot of experts are very misinformed, and there's a missing piece in the puzzle. And I feel like what you've started talking about with me and what you talk about in all your stuff is a big part of that puzzle of that healing of the gut, right?
Totally. I just have such a conviction that our bodies are designed to heal and thrive when they're eating the things that they should be having. I don't think it's this huge mystery thing, but we all have been uninformed. And, both of us, we put our hands up. We did the vegan juicing, raw cacao, all that. And so it's not like, we've had our own journey, but definitely I agree. And what I see with a lot of clients is they come to me with severe histamine intolerance and food intolerances, and they can only eat these 2, 3, 4 foods. And then we start doing GAPS. We start doing the meat stock, slowly keeping it low histamine. And then, a month from then, they can eat 5 or 6 foods, or 7 or 8. And so it's not an overnight thing. These microbiome imbalances take decades, if not generations, because we get our gut microbiome from our parents' microbiome and their parents. So it's been generations of building up with that processed food, the glyphosate, the antibiotic overuse, all that. So we can't expect to heal it like that. But, I see it pretty quickly with histamine intolerance. It does get resolved. And, my clients will go from eating, like they can't have 1 drop of sauerkraut juice to then they're eating 3 tablespoons with every meal and having bowls of yogurt and, a cup of kefir. And if you're a histamine intolerance sufferer out there, you would be like, there's no way I can do that. I hear this all the time. I cannot do that. There's no way. Like 1 drop of that and I'm on the bed for 3 days. And I just want to say, I understand. I really do. That was my husband. That's a lot of people I work with, but it can be resolved. So check out those videos and learn, I guess, how to heal your gut so that you don't have this for the next 20, 30 years. Don't live like that,
Fully. We're not meant to be sick, right? We're meant to be well. And I think so many health problems are normalized. Like it's normal to feel unwell or have a little bit of joint pain or have a little bit of this and that. But yeah, we're meant to feel good. And I don't think people realize that. Did you know the first part of our body to dehydrate is our brain? So if you're not getting enough fluids into your body, then you are going to be missing out on that crucial brain function and all those things that your body needs when it's hydrated. Water doesn't do the trick alone, so that's why I take supplements. I use Sodi Hydration. It's my favorite electrolyte supplement. Perfect blend of sodium, magnesium, and potassium to help you with your needs. I don't really get much in my diet, being on a meat-based diet, and this really helps to supplement, especially if you're doing nervous system healing or you've got trauma or you're doing gut healing and stuff like that. Having these kinds of things as a supplement is fantastic. So these guys are the creme de la creme in Australia. Big fan. They're actually one of my first sponsors throughout all my content here. So I'm really grateful to be working with them. Get 15% off using my code Rory's Kitchen at Sodi. That's SODII.com.au. And 15% off. Give it a crack. Let me know what you think. I'm a big fan. They've got citrus, berry, grapefruit, pineapple, great flavors. My body doesn't react. Love it. So yeah, probably have about 2 of these a day, sometimes 3. And it makes a huge difference in my overall well-being, I feel. Actually, I'm going to have one right now. Crack it open, chuck it in some water. That's good. If my 5-year-old digs it, he's like, can I have some sodi? Anyway, on with this week's episode. I've got a question for you around like carnivore and histamine, because I've been dabbling into the carnivore thing, probably more so than the GAPS recently. Like I said, out of sheer laziness, I'm about to dive like properly into the GAPS now that I kind of feel very comfortable with this kind of plateau that I'm at. But a lot of people jump into carnivore and they don't focus on the gut healing aspect of like sorting themselves out. They just go pure elimination. They don't focus on the gut healing, and they still can't introduce foods even after months or years. Like what do you reckon is missing in the carnivore diet in terms of histamine and healing.
Definitely. I think carnivore is amazing. I've seen some really cool results, like with you and some other people who are healing from chronic, joint pain and things like that. I do think there's kind of a problem in the mentality where it's almost like less is more to an extreme. Like carnivore is good, but getting rid of dairy is better, and getting rid of eggs is better, and getting rid of, like, just doing the lion diet. And I know that works for some people, but I think it would be so awesome for the carnivore community to come out of that a little bit of, like, some of the foods aren't necessarily better. It depends who you are. And so I think people really miss out on the probiotics, which you can get doing carnivore. If you're going to do raw milk yogurt, raw milk sour cream, raw milk kefir, which is the best food ever for introducing any, it has like 70, 60 beneficial strains of bacteria and yeast that change your microbiome a ton. I actually have a video coming out where I did the math comparing raw milk kefir, homemade, that anyone can do, to the top therapeutic probiotic supplements. And these are like GAPS approved good supplements. So having those probiotics is important for healing the gut lining, because that's what our gut lining is made of. It's beneficial bacteria and beneficial yeast. And so if you're doing all the animal products, but you're not really having any forms of, if you're having all those animal foods, but you're not having any forms of the probiotics in there, it's going to take a while for your gut lining to really heal. And also the meat's great, but focusing so much on those muscle meats, those are quite high fiber and they're not really healing for the gut lining. Where in GAPS, we really focus more on meat that's close to the bone. So like ossobuco or, oxtail, or even a whole chicken, something like that. You're getting a lot more of those proteins that heal your gut. So you've had meat stock a bunch, and when you take a sip, your lips kind of stick together. It's like a glue, and it goes down and it heals that gut lining. So I guess with carnivore, it's so great, but I would really encourage people to have that meat stock if they can, the more gelatinous cuts of meat, and then some probiotic foods. Even the animal-based probiotic foods can be great. And I've seen people, like, I haven't done this yet, but I've seen people ferment the raw meat. So you don't have to do dairy. You can kind of experiment with some of that raw meat fermentation. I don't know if you've done that, Rory. Maybe that's nice.
Yeah, maybe for a 24-hour challenge, but beyond that, I'm not really a big raw meat guy. I'm a very much like medium well to well done these days as well. But I have friends that are now doing raw and they're seeing benefits. So I think that there's definitely something to it. But I'm so glad you shared all of that around, the meat stock, the connective tissue, the proteins, the probiotics and everything. Because from what I've been reading, I've been revisiting the GAPS books recently so I can have that knowledge again. And it's just amazing hearing all this information that I just don't, it's not well known enough. There's not enough airtime on the power of something like meat stock, right? Like that, and probiotics is like the number one superfoods from everything that I've been learning, right?
Oh, it's incredible. And they're so powerful. It amazes me how these traditional foods that our ancestors had, kefir's been around forever. Broths and stocks have been around forever, thousands of years. They are so healing. They really are detoxifying, and they rebuild your body better than any of these supplements on the market. And honestly, for a lot of people, especially those who are dealing with histamine intolerance, this is why you need to go very slow. People who are severely histamine intolerant, I don't recommend jumping straight into intro like Rory did. Did you jump? Well, you kind of did lion diet first, but it can be a lot. Men handle it better because they're a bit more like full on, but start with tiny amounts of meat stock, work your way up, and tiny amounts of these fermented foods. Do not underestimate them. They are so powerful, and they can give you those huge die-off histamine detox reactions if you don't work your way up slowly.
Yeah, I definitely jumped into some things and I didn't really know. Like, I personally, like, my philosophy, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is you're better off starting to take some steps than take none moving forward. And for me, I just kind of jumped into stuff. I was like, okay, I think I know enough to jump into it and start making changes. But yeah, then it's like learning those little things of like, oh, actually, your body is going to go into this thing called die-off. There are going to be side effects, but are like actually positive side effects, and you just got to learn how to do it. I'd love for you to talk about die-off a bit as well in the detox process, because for me, when I started doing this around day 17, 18, and day 21 or whatever, I went into what some people call keto flu or carnivore flu or die off. So yeah, what's that all about?
Yeah. So, well, my experience, I'll just share with you. I guess this was like 12 years ago now. I did GAPS and I went full into it, like you, like my husband, just like overnight, total change. And I think it was 24 hours later, I was walking home from university and I just thought I had the worst flu of my life. I was so sick. I was like, I can't walk. I'm tired. I have a headache. What's going on? Opened the GAPS book and was like, oh, die off. Okay. So we have these good beneficial bacteria, yeast, and then we have the bad ones, right? And most of us that are chronically sick, or I might even venture to say everyone in the Western world, have an overgrowth of these bad pathogen, kind of ones. And so when we stop feeding them, we're doing like a healing carnivore GAPS diet. We stop feeding them those sugars and the starches and the processed foods. They start dying off and they contain a ton of toxic gases. So they start releasing these toxic gases and they start releasing metals and parasites and all of this yucky stuff that now your body has to process. And so it basically is just like a temporary increase in toxicity as these things are dying off and your body's going, I need to get rid of this. And that's why you feel it's like people's symptoms can temporarily get worse. And so GAPS recommends really emphasizing the detoxification part. So we like to think of it as like mainly food, but detox is a huge part. So that would be like having a detox bath with either Epsom salts or apple cider vinegar or baking soda, something like that. Enemas, coffee enemas, you've talked about that before. Really opening up the bowel to get that stuff out so it's not just circulating in your body. Juicing, you can do castor oil packs, skin brushing. So there's really a lot you can do to support that. Or you've also talked about in one of your videos, which I totally agree with, great advice, is using the binders, which is like the clay or the activated charcoal, because those things will go in and they'll just kind of suck up the toxicity and make it go through your bowel so that it's not a burden on your liver as much. It's like, it just kind of shovels it out a lot quicker. So that's kind of the die-off thing. It's like you can get really a lot worse. And that's really with GAPS and the probiotics. But then there's also the other aspect. If you're doing more of a carnivore, no carb thing, you're also going into ketosis, which I don't specialize in, but I know that that can also have an effect, like your body producing ketones. Do you know much about that? Yeah.
No, I know when I research information, I know enough to get a whiff of I'm going to give this a try, and then I move on to the next obsession around stuff. So no, I actually don't know much about keto at all, because it's not like I don't really care about it for me personally, but it seems to be very powerful. And there's even like the ketogenic version of GAPS as well, so obviously there's some like power in it, but yeah, I don't really know much.
I think that's why people love you, because you do just jump into things and you're like, all right, coffee enemas, like who wants to follow my journey? And everyone's like, I know I'm going to get a totally unbiased, you're not a coffee enema 20-year person. You're just trying it out and people actually get a good review. It's like an honest review.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's the benefit. Like I actually started studying nutrition 2009. I was in the process of doing a nutrition degree, but because for me, I have very short span of interests where I get obsessed for a period of time and then I move on pretty quickly because I get what I need, or my hit or whatever. So I didn't end up finishing my degree, which is, a shame, but it's also, I think, a good thing, because now I can provide like a unbiased, non-20-year expert. I'm just a dude that's on a journey and sharing, and it's like, if it works and if it doesn't, then you'll find out. I think it's interesting too. Quick
question. Have you done Myers-Briggs? I'm really curious what your little type is, because
what's
I'm very
that
similar.
Again?
It's like the INTP, ENFJ. Do you know? Because I'm really similar to you. I get super into like gardening for like 3 weeks and then I'm like, all right.
Yeah, I think I'm that one. It's got like a N and a T or a J or a P or something like that. Right. But yeah, I know more about human design and gene keys and like numerology rather than that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to do that as a test for sure.
Yeah, because I'm an INTJ and you just kind of sound like me in a lot of ways, and hearing your story I'm like, this sounds very familiar.
Probably, yeah. I think there's a lot of people, I mean, I don't know how many people out there like it, but for me, I used to think, there's something wrong with me for not sticking to one thing and only being specified and obsessed in interest. And especially when you're trying to make a career, right? It's like my interests would follow, like my career would follow the interests, and you can't do something for 3 weeks and then move on to the next thing. Like you got to, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a
Unless
whole
you're
other
doing
thing that would be
gaps.
interesting.
Actually, gaps is perfect for that, isn't it?
Right? Yeah, making content is the perfect thing for kind of changing your mind every 3 weeks or so. But yeah, that's definitely just something that I'd love to kind of get someone on to talk about more. And by the way, for anyone listening or watching, any of the links that we talk about will be in the show notes in Spotify or iTunes or whatever, or a link in the description on YouTube. So everything will be there as well. I love everything that you've been sharing because it's not out there enough, and it hasn't got enough airtime, especially within these circles. Like, I think Carnivore is incredible. It's been amazing for me, and it's helping so many people heal. But there are missing puzzle pieces for people. And I see that there have been people that have been on Carnivore for years and years, and they still can't introduce foods. And they would like to, but they're stuck there. And I think it's because it's the focus of the removing that people focus on more. And there's this, I don't know if it's an official GAPS thing or if I got it from a GAPS website. It's like remove, replace, restore, where you remove anti-inflammatory triggers, replace it with healing nutrients, restore the gut microbiome. And most people focus on the remove. And that's what I did. And I'm like, this is amazing. But then you plateau and you don't really get the full benefits. And I think also another thing that I see within this that I'd love for you to kind of touch on is like the whole leaky gut thing. Because when I've mentioned leaky gut, people are like, that's not a real thing. It's fake. It's just so people can sell your supplements. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
There definitely is a lot of people trying to sell supplements, that's for sure. And a lot of times the fermented foods do a way better job of that, but it's definitely a problem. I mean, all the autoimmune issues we see, things are growing so rapidly. People are getting sicker and sicker. I mean, I'll just even say 12 years ago, I had the Yellow Gaps book. So much content has changed since then. And Dr. Natasha McBride puts it down to people are getting sicker and sicker. So back then when she would recommend starting with intro, 5 cups of broth or meat stock or whatever, and a spoonful of sauerkraut juice and everything, now it's gone down to start with 1 drop of sauerkraut juice. People are too sick. They can't handle these foods. And I mean, the GAPS book would do a much better job explaining it, but in regards to autoimmune issues, how many people have autoimmune issues? Things like fibromyalgia or even the mast cell activation disorder it's a histamine response, but it's kind of more on the autoimmune side. Still healed the same way, by the way, with GAPS. But it's so common for people to have these incurable autoimmune diseases, and they all stem from leaky gut. It is food that your body is digesting. It's leaking into the bloodstream. It's basically attaching itself to your body with the pathogenic bacteria that we have an overload of. And I think there's actually tons of research on it. It's just not the mainstream research. So you can go to PubMed and just look up, leaky gut or, autoimmune issues. And there's tons of research on probiotics and things to use for that and like rat studies. It's just not common. It's not out there. So there have been studies on it. And the proof's in the pudding, honestly. I've worked with so many people, and on my YouTube channel, I've interviewed a few people who have these really bad cases. One was severe autism, nonverbal. One was fibromyalgia, Lyme. She seriously had everything. She was bedridden, chronic pain. And one was severe eczema from head to toe. So these are all moms or people who have done GAPS for themselves, and that was the issue that they're working with. And so if you say like, oh, it's not a leaky gut, that's not real. Well, then why, when you heal your gut, do these things go away? I mean, have you ever heard of eczema from head to toe? Every single part, your whole body is wrapped like a mummy because you can't do anything. Her name is Danielle Forrester. So if you want to check her out, she's got some great info. But yeah, you heal the gut and it goes away. Or you heal the gut and your kid starts speaking. I mean, I've had that experience with kids many times. They just start speaking within the first few weeks. They start sleeping. They stop wetting the bed. It's very, very powerful. And so, I mean, you can say leaky gut's not a thing, but I don't know. My experience is it really works for healing a vast variety of issues. My husband comes to me all the time. Hey, this person's dealing with this. Is this a gut issue? Yep. It's all gut. And I've seen it get healed, and I'm a pretty honest person. I wouldn't lie to you and be like, oh, I've seen this if I haven't seen it. So yeah.
I think also Google obviously has financial interests from like government parties and all these sorts of things that are trying to feed us the wrong information. So when you do Google things like leaky gut, everything that comes up tells you how it's not real, it's for charlatans, it's for people that are, you know, trying to sell stuff, or, you know, like it's not real. But like no one goes beyond the first page of Google and really like looks into the research and understands that, hey, like increased intestinal permeability, like it's actually a thing. And yeah, like it does create this, it's like this hum, this slow drum of like inflammation that just builds up and up and up, and it just leads to so many things. But yeah, I think it's an epidemic that we are not putting enough attention into, is the gut thing. It's talked about more, but I feel like it gets a bit confusing for a lot of people, because like there are all these gut health influencers now that I've seen that are, you know, doctors or MDs or this kind of thing, and they've got lots and lots of followers, they're verified, and you're like, oh, they seem like they must be the real deal. And then they're like, you know, don't eat meat more than 2 times a day because that's really bad for you, and you're better off having tofu. I'm like, this person is not even, they can't be serious right now. Like, they're a gut health person. So I think there's so much misinformation out there, and people could even be watching or listening to this be like, you guys are spreading misinformation. I think, you know, we kind of find information that gels with our beliefs and stuff. A question for you that I have is, do you think it's possible to actually heal on plant-based, the gut, or I'll say it, rephrase it. Do you think it's possible to heal the gut on a plant-based vegan diet, or do you think that it's got to be an animal-based way of healing?
I definitely think it has to be animal-based. If someone were to show me, okay, so similar to my story and your story, very familiar, most people that come to me with histamine issues and gut issues have been into health for a while, and they've done the vegan thing. Some are coming from kind of the standard Western diet, but most have actually come right out of the vegan thing, and they're like, now I can't tolerate any foods. What's going on? And it's because they're not getting that beneficial bacteria. Even if they are, sauerkraut's great. I love sauerkraut. I have it all the time, but it only has a couple strains of bacteria, where like the milk kefir and the cheeses and all that, they have a huge variety, and that's what you want is variety. So I definitely don't think that veganism can heal your gut. If anything, I mean, your story's probably similar, but you know, when I was a vegan, I ate so much fruit because you're just starving all the time. It's like hummus and fruit is like the only thing you can eat, and nuts, and that increases yeast in your body like crazy. That's what it feeds off, even if it's natural sugar. You can't be having these huge smoothie bowls and acai bowls and all this 20 bananas a day, like you said you did. It feeds the yeast, and they actually puncture holes in the gut lining. And I think that's why people often leave veganism, is not only are they depleted, but their gut's getting worse and they're bloating. And then those people often, if they don't go to GAPS, they go to Carnivore, because what was their favorite thing ever, now they're realizing is causing all these issues. And then they go to Carnivore, and then they can't even tolerate any plants for a while until they build their gut back up, because it was just way too much. And yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on that. What about you? What do you think?
My thoughts on that is, you know, I can speak really from my experience, where I did a lot of things what I would consider to be right. I did junk food vegan initially. I did whole food vegan. Like, I lived in a yoga retreat and we ate really clean. Plus I did the omegas. I had iron, I had B12. You know, I ate what would be classified as a whole food vegan diet, even did the protein. So I did that. And I also did weightlifting as a vegan. I gained like 7 kilos and I was strong. So like, I was strong and everything. And I proved that you don't need meat to build muscle, whatever I was trying to prove. But the whole time that I did any of that, I was still seeking health, which is really interesting. So I never felt like I had health doing vegan or plant-based. I felt like the only time that I actually started to experience health was when I switched over, cut out all plants, and did carnivore. Like, so after 13 years of this mindset, or 14 years, maybe even more, this mindset of plant-based, I finally let go of that and started to do animal-based, and just I basically just accepted that maybe animal foods are what's going to heal me. And if that's the case, then that's okay, because I just don't want to live in pain anymore. And then from everything I started to research around the gut and anti-nutrients and plants and all those sorts of things, I was like, I actually really don't think that people can heal their gut on plant-based. And even people that are vegan influencers are top of the game, like Rich Roll. I love what he does, and he does an amazing job with content. But he did this ultra. What did he do? He's well known for like being really lazy, fat on the couch. What am I doing with my life at 40? And then becoming an ultra marathon runner and doing it fully plant-based. But he shared in a podcast that he goes 5 to 6 times a day. He does number 2. And sometimes they're, pretty on the loose side. And as soon as I heard that, it really confirmed for me that, I think there's a percentage of people that can do okay for whatever reason on plant-based, but I think the majority of people, 84%, I think, convert back to eating meat. And that's because you're not getting what you need to heal the gut. I don't think we're meant to eat that much stuff in terms of the way it's done. Like, I just think there's so many things that are pointing to this is unsustainable for our bodies and, ironically, for the environment and for the animals. So I wouldn't call myself an anti-vegan now. I would call myself an dogmatic diet and approach thing. And I feel like it's shifted away from its original tension, and people are not looking at the faults in it, and they're not looking at the truth of the fact that, hang on, maybe actually animal based, and you don't have to be carnivore, but maybe that's the way forward. That's my thoughts on it.
Definitely. Dr. Natasha McBride, who's the author of the GAPS diet, she talks about how plants are amazing for detoxifying and animal products are building. When you think about it that way, it's like, yeah, they both have their purpose, but if you're only living on detoxification foods, you have to replenish yourself, especially if you're a woman, especially in your fertility years. You hear tons of women losing their periods on a vegan diet and all this stuff. And, I guess one thing I'll say is, if I saw proof that people were going vegan and children were getting healed of autism, which is one of the incurable things, then I might be like, okay, there's a bit of merit. But I mean, that's one of those incurable things that people say it's impossible. And you see it on a animal-based GAPS diet. You see children start speaking and they're, not jumping off the furniture anymore. And it's just amazing. And I haven't seen that with veganism. So a lot of the success stories with veganism are more based around losing weight, looking fit, running. And it's like, yeah, you're living off sugar most of the time, carbs. So, nothing against people and I was a vegan, you were a vegan. So, but just, exactly. Don't be super dogmatic about stuff because it can't be good for your health.
It's powerful what you said. It's like when you can see a certain amount of people healing from a certain thing, for example, autism, it's that is something that 99% of the world population would never imagine that you could transform, maybe not entirely for some kids, but a large amount or even a little bit from doing something like GAPS, right? Or gut healing. I think that indicates that something correct is being done if you can heal the thing that people wouldn't even imagine. So I'm 100% with you on that.
Oh, and if you're a skeptic or you're just interested, there are lots of videos on YouTube of people before and after. One of the interviews I did, her name's Lindsay. Her son was totally nonverbal, wouldn't look at the camera, wouldn't look you in the eye. The before and after videos she takes, before and after GAPS, is incredible. And one more thing I just want to touch on. Our brain is made of fat, and about 60% of that fat is saturated fat. We don't get that from animal products. We don't get that from plant products. We're not getting that from bananas. And so I really am so passionate about just people knowing every cell in your body is made of fat, and a lot of that is saturated fat, including your brain. And that's why we need these animal products. The saturated fat is so good for our hormones, everything. Our gut, butter is amazing for your gut, or ghee if you can't tolerate the lactose. It's basically pre-digested into a specific nutrient that feeds your gut cells, ghee or butter. So that's another little fun carnivore food you can throw in there to heal your gut.
Yeah, ghee is underrated. I love it so much. I love it so much that I've like made a shirt that I can wear around the house that's like that has like a slogan about ghee, because it's like I can tolerate ghee way better than I can butter. You know, like I've been experimenting with butter and ghee, but yeah, I mean they've been doing it for thousands of years in India and these places, and that's an integral part. Like it's actually a very big part of their healing process. And a lot of people think that, oh, you know, they're vegan or they're vegetarian, but it's like, well, if you actually have a look at how much dairy some of these cultures have and how much like probiotic type foods, then I think people, you know, kind of would think. But yeah, I'm with you there. Definitely. Maybe there should be like a underrated foods on the carnivore diet, or like, you know, there's like we can both make it, but you know, you do one, I'll do one, but like foods that you should include if you're on carnivore to heal your gut. Because I think that, yeah, like I think that a lot of people that are doing carnivore are on the right track and they're doing great things, and I think that's kind of a step in the right direction. But yeah, this, like everything that you've been sharing is just, I think it would be so invaluable for my peeps, because yeah, it's just not talked about enough.
Oh, that's great. I want to throw one more nugget in there. Because you said you're not
All
tolerating, yeah, if you're not tolerating butter well, have you had kefir or the whey from milk kefir yet?
Not yet. No, I have been keen to, but it's been really sheer out of like laziness, and then also like, yeah, like trying to figure out budgeting and stuff like that as well. Because I spend a lot of money on grass-fed organic meat, and so it's like trying to be smart with figuring out how do you do everything in the right way. But now that I've spent a bit of time doing this, I've figured out this works. It's actually doesn't have to be as expensive as people think it does. And I think now that I've worked out how much I need to eat, how much things cost, and what it all looks like, and then also, but even more importantly, realizing how much I could have healed faster if I was doing the probiotics. Now it's like, it becomes less of a, whatever it is, and it becomes more of a priority now. Basically, that's a long-winded way of saying it's something that I've wanted to do, and now that I know that it's really important, I'm prioritizing it. So I'm getting a yogurt maker, and I'm getting, you know, different things so I can do that. Yeah,
you don't even need a yogurt maker.
Really?
Yeah, I just put mine. You can put it in an esky with like warm water around it, or you can put them in the oven just on like the light setting for yogurt. But kefir can just be set on the bench. But I just want to say real quick with kefir, if you make that kefir, I know you're sensitive to dairy and stuff, but it has beneficial bacteria that helps you break down lactose. So if you were to do that, and then even just have the whey, which is like the liquid that has no lactose in it. So if you let it ferment for like 24 hours, it'll break. So then it'll show like the dairy will come to the top, and then the liquid is the whey. So that has virtually no lactose at all. So if you start with a drop of that, that'll start giving you that bacteria to break down the lactose. And it might help just with the butter introduction if you're kind of stumped with that.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Because yeah, there's not a lot of stuff that is out there that teaches you how to make, you know, yogurt, like raw milk yogurt without a yogurt maker that's easy, how to make kefir that's easy, like just these things, because not everyone has a bloody yogurt maker sitting in the garage or in the kitchen, right? So I'm definitely going to give that a go, because yeah, that's what I really want to focus on next. Is I got the meat stocks down. I know I can tolerate sauerkraut juice. That's cool. Veggies, pumpkin seems to be okay, just tiny bits at a time, super cooked. But yeah, kefir, probiotic dairy, that's the next thing, 100%. Is there anything that you've got coming up that you're excited about or want to share with people?
Well, I am working on a course for healing histamine intolerance with GAPS that'll just help people kind of walk through the stages of how to do it low histamine, and for people who have that real sensitivity to histamines. So I'm excited about that, but yeah, I think that's it. And that's a slow process, honestly. I've got 2 kids, so
yeah,
when I get around to it, but still fun. And then, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And you're creating really great content. So where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram as Grounded Approach, YouTube Grounded Approach, and I have a Facebook, but I don't really use it. So yeah, just Grounded Approach on there. And
got it. And do you have a website as well?
Yeah, groundedapproach.com.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and so you like, what kind of people do you work with in like a clinical kind of patient type setting?
Yeah, so I do everything over Zoom. So I have a lot of international clients and everything, but mostly histamine intolerance. That's the main thing, is people who can't digest any foods. And so just working with them through the GAPS protocol to introduce foods and to get rid of that histamine intolerance.
That's amazing. That's something that I feel so many people can benefit from, and I know you know that as well. So do you reckon even my people that are carnivore and are not really interested in GAPS necessarily, but do you think people like that could really benefit from working with you as well?
Oh, absolutely. And there's some basic things. And I mean, I give away all my secrets. I'm not really one that hides them, but add that meat stock in, have ghee if you can, and some milk kefir. It'll help you go wonders. But yeah, I absolutely work with a lot of people on the carnivore diet, so I could do that as well.
Amazing. Guys, go spam her inbox and her booking calendar and all those sorts of things. Because I tell you, working with someone and having the support with someone when you're stuck or don't know what you're doing or whatever is just incredible. And Heather is one of those people that I recommend checking out. So please go bombard her. Maybe not too much, but just, but go for it. What is your message to the world?
I think my message to the world would be focus on your gut before it becomes a huge problem. And if you can really put the time into healing your gut before you have kids. It is so sad how many kids are coming into this world with, kind of the similar stuff that we had, but even worse, the asthma, the food allergies, severe eczema. And it's so hard to treat it when you're a mom and you're trying to breastfeed and do all that. It just feels like a whirlwind. So if you can do that before you have kids, then you can pass on that good microbiome to your kids and have happy, healthy kids that are content and they have good moods and they're easy to be around and you enjoy being around them and they're, responsible. And like, I get compliments on my daughter all the time. I'm not trying to brag. I always say like, it's the food, it's not me. But she's got great temperament and I trust her. And she's very trustworthy for a 3-year-old. And, but similarly, if I were to go to a birthday party and feed her cake, she can be absolute terror. So just prioritize your gut, heal your gut before you get pregnant if you can. And so that we can have the next generation of really happy, healthy kids. That would be amazing.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm just so excited that this information is getting out there. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Oh, thanks, Rory. It was so fun.
You know what? You're a legend. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode or watch it if you're on YouTube. It means the world to me. And there's plenty more where this came from as well. So if you'd like to see more content or listen to more podcast content, then you can just hit subscribe on YouTube. If you're on Spotify or iTunes or the other things, 5-star rating goes a very, very long way and would be forever grateful. For any of the resources and links mentioned, you can head over to rorybland.com and you can check out my exclusive newsletter at rorybland.com/newsletter. Thank you again, and I can't wait for you to check out the next one.